Hello, fictional. Welcome to the Fiction Series X. Today we are gonna see, what if Issei got harem with Irina, Raynare and Ophis? Part 3. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. It is a little grumpy, isn't it? The child called Ophis had said that so casually, so nonchalantly with that listless look on her face, that SCP-682 actually stared at the girl, with what could have been described as the human equivalent of a slack-jawed expression. Humans had called it all sorts of things. Terrifying, monstrous and dangerous were amongst those. A rare few called it hideous, and they usually end up dead. But to be called grumpy, of all things, as if she'd just described a moody child who was denied their favorite toy by their parents. The sheer audacity of this one. That's maybe. He would not be very pleasant to hold a conversation with. Rude. I am still here. Yes, you are. I apologize. In any case, how did you get out of the bathroom? Issei asked, hands on his hips as he looked to his friend. She made to answer, lips parting into a small O before closing. And then, she answered. I climbed out. And found this one nearby. You climbed out of the house from the second floor. His eyes went wide, head snapping back towards the house. Dying. And it's so tall, too, wasn't it scary? Heights do not scare me much. Nice. I'd give it a shot, but I don't know how to climb anything besides trees. I don't think climbing the wall of a house is as easy as a tree. Perhaps. The monstrous lizard watched their interaction, head swiveling from one person to the next, as it tried to come to terms with the fact that they'd practically ignored it. Instead, they'd moved on to talking about late dinner supper and ice cream, something that got Ophis to visibly perk up, only to then ask about chocolate and cake. This was not happening. Now, SCP-682 wasn't a stranger to a lot of weird things. If anything, it itself is a strange thing, and it's had to live knowing that all kinds of strange things exist in this crazy world of theirs. That was just a brand of normalcy that it's come to accept. But if there was one thing it had never dealt with, it was being treated as background noise. Even suspended in acid and kept away from the reach of any of the personnel, everyone had always been wary. Rightfully so, since it had always been capable of escaping and kill them along the way, of course. The other creatures trapped alongside it hadn't always been friendly to it, though it wasn't like it would have cared. But to be ignored by these people. Literally, despite standing right there between them, 6 feet tall and with a few chunks of meat in its teeth that probably stink, they were ignoring it. Instead, they just kept talking to each other. But I'm pretty sure it's not good to eat so much before you sleep. It is, okay. I have fast metabolism. Meta what? That's a big word. Where'd you learn that? Auntie mentioned it once. I got curious and wanted to know more. Isn't that biology related? Hey, what's your name? It took a few moments to register the fact that it was actually being called out this time. Hundreds of eyes looked to the boy, whose chocolate eyes were watching it with a curious gaze. Not a single shred of fear or doubt. Absolutely nothing. What? Your name? What was it? SCP-682. You have numbers for a name? That's weird. It bristled back. It's a designation. Huh. Okay. So, the thing. Metame whatever the word Ophis just used. You know that. Its brain was like a computer loading up after having not been used for almost a year. Eventually, however, it managed to scrounge together an answer. Metabolism. It is the process of supplying the body with energy required to carry out activities, and then, it paused once more. Wait, why am I explaining your simplistic biology to you? You should know yourself. I'm only 6. He grinned back, a little too proudly for that matter. Imbecile. But even so, I don't think it's good to eat too much before you sleep. It's not good for you, fast metabolism or no. I see, okay then. I will be more careful. Good. So would you be staying around? I don't know if there's any room for you in our house. Not at all. 682 will be returning to his home soon, she said to him. Is that correct? That is the plan, yes. The boy visibly deflated at that, looking somewhat disappointed. Aw, that's a shame. I've never met an animal that could talk. And you're pretty smart too, and then, he perked up with a grin. Say, where do you live? We could visit you if we have time. For a moment, the creature was struck by an instinctual need to just strike the boy down. But a quick glance at the girl beside him was enough for it to stay that urge. I live far. You will not find me, brat. Well, that sucks, he sighed. Well, nothing that can be done about that, right? So yeah, take care of yourself. It was nice to meet you. Ophis, we should be heading back in soon. I will come soon. I'd like to talk to 682 for a little longer. Cool. Good night to you, Mr. Lizard. It was the silliest name that one has ever called it by, and the beast practically bent over wheezing. Not like the brunette cared. He practically just smiled and walked back into his house, all too casual despite what he'd just seen and talked to. Thank you for not trying anything on him. It knew it was just imagining the murderous look on her face, but for some reason, it couldn't help but wonder what she would have done to it had it attempted to harm the boy. For the sake of its mind, it decided to put that thought out of its mind. That boy, what is he to you? Issei is my best friend, she said. And I will not allow anyone or anything to hurt him. Then, she looked it in the eyes. Not even you. Despite the words coming out with nary an emotion, SCP-682 could not help but imagine the underlying threat in her words. Anxiety thrummed in its gut for but a moment, and the beast snapped its head away, hiding its momentary shudder. What are you? The Ouroboros dragon. Dragon. The name brings to mind SCP-1762, and its frustration is replaced with melancholy. Here were dragons. Perhaps they had been pieces of paper, as those scientists had called them, but 681 knew they were far more than that. But before it stood a true dragon. SCP-682 looked to the creature wearing human skin, and only now had it seemed to notice the strange aura wafting off of her. And her scent not so unsimilar from a human, but likely because she'd attempted to mask it. Now, however, made much more aware of her true nature, the lizard holds no doubts as to what she smelt like. I never knew dragons existed. And yet, you exist. Anything can, touché. Have you ever met dragons? I do not recall. My life within my walls of confinement had me see little beyond what I know. But I recognized one such entity that lived alongside me in the facility. But you, creature, are certainly something different, though you look nothing akin to a dragon. No scales. No reptilian eyes. No tail. The ears, on the other hand, seemed a little sharper. Those do stand out a little. How had it not noticed those? I chose this appearance to better live alongside the humans. Much more convenient. I suppose, after a long pause, it let out a sigh. Well, I've done as you asked. It's time you send me back. I suppose it is. There was no fancy chanting. No extravagant gesture or whatever. Just a flick of her wrist. And the world around it flashed away. Concrete roads, brick houses and street lamps were whisked away like some kind of dream, leaving it to stand in the middle of a clearing, where greenery and naturalness thrived. All the lingering traces of carbon in the air was replaced by the fresh winds it had gotten acquainted with, easing all the stress in its being. But that did not do away with the fact that the little dragon was standing right beside it in that moment, looking around with that listless look. You are a strange one. I have never seen one such as you. So I am the only one of my kind. What is it to you? It hissed back. Nothing at all, but simple curiosity, she hummed. Either way, you have my gratitude for meeting Issei. And what purpose did that serve? No reason, the creature actually faltered at that. I was curious to see what his reaction would be. He seemed rather calm, which is impressive. And as begrudging as it was to admit, even SCP-682 was surprised by the lack of what should be the normal reactions of someone seeing a terrifying monster such as itself. Fear was the most apparently lacking one. If anything, he was friendly with it, which was weird in itself. Seriously, what is with the children of this day and age? Have they truly grown this fearless than it had thought possible? Perhaps a natural course of evolution after all that they're exposed to on a daily basis. Nevertheless, I shall leave you to it. Have a good night, 680. What? Hold on, you. Another flash of light, causing it to reel backwards in shock, only to open its eyes once more and see nothing. Quick as she had brought it to her home, just as quick as she was to leave him behind. Never mind. Weird. All of those interactions, of which were likely the first true ones outside of its days of containment, were just weird. None of them had gone in any way as it had expected, leaving it with way more questions than intended and a headache, which is impressive in itself, considering that it had never experienced one before. Still, it was a little uneasy about things. That office. She called herself the Ouroboros dragon. And if there was one thing it had come to learn, anything with such a grand-sounding name such as that was either a joke or a true monstrosity. Having seen her in action mere moments ago, however. Those men. They called themselves magicians, whatever they were. And sure, they weren't a true threat, unlike the armed forces of the containment facility. Just a bunch of arrogant humans who threw round spells and thought that would be enough to kill it. SCP-682 could have done them in by itself, but Ophis had decided to join in the fight. And she had left nothing behind to bury. The beast shook its head with a groan. Dragons, children, magic, this was all just too much for it. Might as well just sleep on it for the night. Oh, Ophis, did you just climb back into the bathroom? Yes. I don't think that's necessary, but okay. Come on, Mom and Dad are calling us for cookies and ice cream. Cookie-flavored ice cream? No, those two things are separate for now. But next time, we'll see if we could get some cookie dough ice cream. Those are pretty good, from what I heard. Very well. Another time. Let's go. Hey, wait, you don't need to pull my hand. Haha, Ophis, chill out. Issei is not afraid of a lot of animals. He'd met a talking lizard 3 nights ago. Issei stops whatever he was doing earlier, which was for anyone curious to know, though it wasn't as if his life was a story being read by a third party or anything counting stamps. He was in the middle of pasting one into a book he'd been keeping since around a few months ago, and he's already had 4 pages filled out, which is pretty good in his opinion. Hey Ophis. The other night. We did see a talking lizard outside of our house, right? It wasn't just a dream. We did indeed see a talking lizard. His name was SCP-682. Ah, okay, he let out a few. Wiping his brow. I thought I was crazy. If anything, the world we live in is the crazy one. Poetic, but true. Not counting the big talking lizard, seriously, he'd never met an animal that could talk like a person does. And so fluently, too. There were all sorts of crazy things out there that are probably being kept as government secrets. And even more being discovered, those that haven't been discovered already, and a lot more. He wouldn't be surprised if someday another crazy monster shows up sometime or another. Needless to say, he had jinxed himself when he thought that. But for the time being, let's not think further on that. For a moment there, he wonders if Ophis is part of that supernaturality, only to then shrug. She's just quirky, but nothing to the extent of being utterly out of this world. Maybe. Thinking back on it now, SCP-682 is a weird one. Even more than the one with the tail that looks like its own head, the 2-headed bobtail lizard. Those are so weird looking. Since it practically goes beyond whatever any other lizard has ever had, more than 3 eyes, oddly hairy, could talk, and was easily 5 times his size. Like, what kind of lizard is it? Now that he thought about it, he should probably be more concerned about where it had come from and why. But instead, his mind opted to shrug it off as a normal Tuesday night. He hummed for a moment, went back to pasting some new stamps into his book, before talking to Ophis once more. Say, Ophis, the girl hummed back. I gotta ask. Why were you outside the house that time? I wanted to ask you that time, but I sorta forgot. Oh, right. That she seemed to drawl gave him pause. Ophis. I noticed something strange outside, so I climbed outside and happened to see SCP-682. Really? Huh. Talk about a weird turn of events. It must have been the flash of light, right? She nodded. So you just went to check it out and you just happened to meet the big guy. That's how it was, yes. Weird. But pretty cool, he grinned. What are the odds that some crazy monster shows up out of nowhere and you get to talk to it? Ophis quirked a brow at him. Were you not afraid of him? Should I have been? He asked back. Actually, he said after thinking on it. I guess I should be. Like, most people would probably be screaming right off the bat. And you didn't. I know, right. And I don't know why. The boy crossed his arms, humming with a thoughtful look on his face. I guess I'm just not that easily scared of things. Not like my mom or dad, I'd say. Mom's not good with insects, and dad is, but don't tell anyone this. Not even dad. He'd be embarrassed afraid of dolls. Well, the old kind that you'd find in a creepy doll store or something. Like Chucky or something. I see, and you aren't bothered by anything. Nothing comes to mind. Insects, spiders, small spaces or holes, I'm usually just good with all of them. Ophis seemed oddly interested in that, eyes narrowed as she hummed slowly. Some kind of idea was rolling around in her head and he wasn't sure if he liked it or not. Do you mind if we experiment? I am curious if there is anything that you're afraid of. Call it an experiment if you will. Ooh, an experiment. The brunette perked up like a raised flag, grinning in excitement. Hey, we could do that, yeah. A fun little experiment just to do all kinds of stories. And hey, I'm always down for knowing more about myself. How about we go to the park tomorrow? We can have a fun outing at the same time. It was Ophis's turn to brighten, eyes gaining a glint to them. Outing, she repeated, with what sounded emotionless, but which he was familiar enough with to be able to recognize her poorly veiled excitement. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow it is. Ophis loved a lot of things in the human realm, Issei's family, the food, all the places they visit, and the fun things she's gotten the chance to try. Strange how all the freedom in the world never allowed her to pursue the simplicity of life, if only because she'd never think to give them a try. And now, she'd especially grown fond of going out of the house together, be it to the nearest beach park or driving around town to sightsee in the night. It was such a strange thing. Prior to joining the Hyoudous, she had all the freedom to explore all the world she'd wanted, and she'd done so following the beat of her own drum. She was easily one of the few to have seen all kinds of sights that no other creatures have. And yet, why was it so much more meaningful now? So much more enjoyable. Was it because of this sense of restraint? Where before she had all the opportunity to just go anywhere she wished without anyone to tell her yes or no, not being able to just go off on her own anytime she wished meant that there was a limited amount of time, which is when she'd get to appreciate her surroundings more deeply. Was it some kind of reversal effect? A concept of reverse psychology, as some people call it. Ophis hummed, eyes gazing over to the front of the group. Or perhaps she mused. It's simply that I've never had anyone else to experience the moments with. Mom, hurry up. Let's set up our picnic spot already. I want to go bug catching with Ophis. Be bug catching? How would you? Oh, for heaven's sake, is that why you brought that butterfly net, dear? Of course. You try saying no to Issei. It ain't easy to say no to such a cute kid like me and Ophis, right? Cheeky little scamp. The park they visited was a little ways away, needing an actual 10 minutes drive to get away from the busier parts of town. It wasn't isolated and wetnut, but with it being a weekday and most people likely still busy, it was amazingly sparse and not at all loud. A good thing, too, for she doubted she would have been able to enjoy it this much if it were so occupied. They crossed the crest of a little hill and found themselves in a little clearing, a perimeter of trees at least 3 feet or so around them. Grass swayed around them like little dancing figures, providing a sense of serenity that eased her very well. Blanket, settled. Basket, in place. Yosh. Time to. Now, Issei. Let's at least drink a little before you run off for your little fun. The drink was exactly what she needed. Ophis sat on her knees beside Auntie while Issei sat beside his father. Auntie took time to meticulously prepare everyone's cups and napkins before finally pulling out a flask, of which she poured out hot green tea for everyone. Ophis accepted her cup with a quiet thank you. She sipped from her drink and basked in the warmth of the fields, the morning breeze and the simple herby taste of her drink. Issei, shall we go now? She asked when she'd finished her cup. Sure thing. With a nod, he accepted the butterfly net offered by his father and slung it over his shoulder with a determined grin. Onwards. Let's. Surrounded by nature like this, it wouldn't be hard to find some bugs. The occasional butterfly flutter about in the air and skitter across a dirt mound that Issei warns her not to accidentally kick, and a big black stag beetle. The last one of which is stuck to a tree with a large maw of sorts that warns her that it would be terrible if it bit her. Not like Issei hesitates in the slightest. Ooh, cool. A stag beetle. Either it's lion-like courage, reckless or mere ignorance, Issei easily reached out to grab its body with his bare hand. Ophis watches him all the while, eyes somewhat wide in surprise at the action. It begins struggling in his grip, but he doesn't seem uncomfortable or anything. Be careful. Yeah, I hear you. If you're not careful, you could accidentally hurt yourself holding this thing, he hummed, grinning at it. People usually wear gloves when handling these things. And you are using your bare hands. Yeah. Guess I should have thought to get gloves. Still doesn't make the fact that he's holding it in his hand without any form of protection any less impressive. Ophis knows for a fact that some humans would be repulsed by the idea of holding such a massive insect, and some would not readily hold one without protective gear. Yet another sign of Issei's surprising lack of hesitation and fear. They spend the next few hours doing all kinds of things, which typically involves exploring the area. Walking around and generally enjoying the peace and quiet was very nice. Auntie and uncle would join them sometimes before they'd opt to return to their picnic area to keep watch over their stuff and leave them to have their own fun. Issei, of course, makes good on his promise to interact with as many animals as possible, insects, the stray dogs that they encounter, and a few cats. The dogs come as a surprise to her, for she'd assumed that strays are typically more aggressive to strangers, though his ability to placate them without even a treat in hand earns him even more respect. And he, of course, shows great skill in netting butterflies. She'd taken at least 8 tries before she finally managed to catch her first one. They'd also gotten the chance to hold snails, catch frogs and even get a bird, though the last one required some breadcrumbs, which Auntie was smart to pack first, in case they ever wanted to try get some near. Charming little things. Eventually, they run into the issue of having nothing else to find. They had their fill, and it had been hours since. Done already, kiddos? Uncle asked kindly as they sat down on the blanket. Yeah. And we got to see quite a lot of them. Issei grinned, passing the net over to his father. It was pretty fun. Ophis. I feel the same. And I am a little amazed, she admitted, getting him to tilt his head in curiosity. After all, you were not afraid when you touched everything. I doubt there is anyone just like you. Not wrong there. Issei's probably got it from my old man, chuckled uncle. Grandpa wasn't afraid of anything either. Nope. As far as I can remember, he was always the brave man who took care of anything whenever we were too scared to do so. Like beeperches in the bathroom, big lizards. Huh. That's rather impressive. Do most traits that children possess are simply passed down from a parent or from higher up the chain? It makes her wonder if a child is capable of something completely unique to themselves or merely a remix of prior traits from their family. A sigh from beside her draws her gaze towards Auntie. I just wish you'd be a little more careful. You never know if you'd end up touching something dangerous. But I'm careful. Issei, honey. Sorry. I'll be more careful next time. Issei suddenly paused, looking over to her with a surprised look. Office. Yes, Issei? She asked. Did you just laugh? The dragoness blinked back, noticing now how uncle and auntie were also staring at her with the same expression as their son did. I don't think so, she replied. Even so, he didn't seem to buy it, grinning from ear to ear. I guess you didn't. If he wasn't smiling so much, she might have believed him. It's just that you've never laughed before. Anything funny? I don't think anything you said or did was humorous in any way. Then it was probably just a reflex, he snickered. But that aside, let's start eating already. I'm famished. Auntie, as always, chides him for his lack of patience, while uncle just chuckles in his good-natured way and pats him on the head. Issei's smile never falls, and just the sight alone made the entire day worth it. They returned home sometime late into the evening, full and a little tired. The latter applies more to the children, since they'd done a lot more walking than the parents did. By the time they'd arrived home, the skies had already seemed darker, and the faintest hints of drizzle had started pattering away on their homes. Uncle had opted to leave alone to get some ingredients from the grocery store, promising to be back in time for dinner. It's around that time that the drizzles gradually turn into a heavy storm, much less so for their neighborhood to suddenly be so dark and sending everyone outside into a scramble to get back indoors. Awk. Such a powerful clap of thunder from outside sounds close enough to a gunshot, which is enough to make her freeze in her place. Fortunately, upon realizing what it was, she managed to calm herself quickly enough. Man, that was loud, Issei commented as he looked up to the ceiling, with all the casualness of a man discussing the current fruit season. Hope Dad's okay out there, so long as Uncle isn't actively running around with a steel rod or standing under a tree, he should be fine. You're not afraid of thunder? I'm okay with them. I get startled by loud noises from time to time, but they don't bother me too much. So no astrophobia on his part, then. What about the ocean? Or space? Nada. I think divers and astronauts are cool as heck. And I think the ocean and space are both awesome too. She accepts it with a hum, watching her best friend stacking coins on top of one another to make a whole tower. It seems to shake a little in the middle, but Issei keeps on adding more to the height, intending to challenge its ultimate limit. Yeah. Thunder. It comes in a timely snap that it would have drowned out the scream in its entirety, but for the fact that it was just a mere second too late, the sound was made immediately clear to them. Office's head snapped towards the stairs, black eyes wide. Auntie, she whispered. Mom. Beside her, Issei had immediately shot to his feet, causing the tower of metal to fall in a steady rhythm of clinkering. Office was right behind him as he raced up the stairs. Hang on, Mom, we're coming. Uncle wasn't in the house, and with the current thunderstorm playing out, so many things could be possible. Office couldn't bring herself to think of the worst possibility, intent solely on finding Auntie and making sure she was safe. What had happened? Everything had been just fine mere moments ago. It was too sudden, so out of nowhere with nary a sign of an attack from the outside, that Office felt like she'd been dosed with ice-cold water. Her urgency was a shock to her, but she allowed it all the same, fueling her hasty chase after Issei as they darted to his parents' bedroom. His hand reached for the doorknob and it was unlocked, thank goodness. Had it not been so, she might have just blitzed it apart with a magic spell. Not like she intended to reveal herself to anyone, but if it meant saving Issei and his family, then she couldn't have cared. Hang on, Mom. We're here. He pushed against the door, slamming it against the wall. Mom, are you? Issei. The woman in question was pressing her back to the wall closest to the wardrobe, her face pale and dress wrinkled everywhere. Be careful. What was it? Had something invaded their home and bypassed her detection magic? Her head swiveled above, using high-tier magic to achieve perfect vision and acuity, yet nothing was beholden to her gaze. She clicked her tongue, feeling an uncanny sense of dread. Where was this creature? What was? Something moved fast. She felt it long before she even saw it, spotting it dart from the bed to the window, hiding itself behind the curtain. The dragoness gulped. Be it the strange situation, the monster in question or the thought that someone she liked, in that blood-pumping situation, the idea that she'd developed feelings of affection towards another being hadn't fully registered, was in danger. She was on full alert now. Her hands clenched and unclenched as she closed the gap between her back and the doorway, not willing to let herself be open to an attack from any angle. This is bad, she thought to herself, eyes homed in on the curtains. Whatever it is, it must be some kind of advanced life form. Or it has some kind of powerful magic that's negating my detection magic. A small magic circle spun on her palm, no words necessary to be chanted as she tweaked the spell to let loose a speed-enhanced thunderbolt that will not leave behind any remains. It would do its job of effectively killing the cretin, which would keep Issei and his mother safe. Even if it meant exposing herself. She bit down on her lip. That would be bad but… oh, crap. It's coming. Issei's shout comes in time for something bright yellow to jump right in their way. In that moment, Ophis' breath halts. Her hand flings upwards, ready to take the shot. Only for Issei to throw himself forwards like a fired arrow, landing on the floor with a loud oof. It was so fast, so sudden, that she was momentarily frozen in place. The loud collision broke her stupor, quick to rush to his side as Auntie watches from afar. "Issei," she cried out in an uncharacteristically worried tone. "Are you okay?" Is it her worry was cut right through when Issei started laughing. "Issei. Haha. Ophis, you don't have to worry about anything." He grinned. His hands were clasped together in a way that meant that he'd successfully caught the thing. She looked at him in shock. "It's just a bug. Look." Without any form of concern, he slowly parts his hands to reveal the invader, and it was indeed an insect. A sizable one, in fact, for the thing fit his entire hand. Its yellow frame and long antennae stood out the most, and it shuddered once, likely having tried to free itself out of the boy's hold, but he managed to keep it in. "It's a grasshopper." He sounded relieved when he said it, his voice coming out in a chuckle. "I thought it was something much worse when you started screaming, Mom. Didn't think it was a little guy like this." "That is hardly little." To the side, Auntie let out a sigh of relief. "Oh, Issei, I'm so sorry. I was about to take a shower, but then that thing jumped out and this is a little embarrassing." "Nah, don't worry about it, Mom. Not everyone is good with insects like me. It's fine." I know, but I do so wish that I was a little better with them, like you are." "Well, this just means I get to save you anytime a critter like this shows up." He sounded so proud of that, like he'd been given the mission of saving the world. Auntie visibly beamed at his words, looking much better and laughing in response. "Well, time to send this guy well on his way. Ophis, watch Mom for a little bit, yeah?" "Of course." And off he goes, leaving the room to release the grasshopper. It's with such enthusiasm and lack of hesitation that truly sets her aback for how different he is from typical human children that she knows of something truly head-scratch worthy. Well, she supposed he was right on one thing: if they'd ever need anything caught, he'll be there to save the day, as he put it. And judging by the look of relief on Auntie's face, that might just be real helpful. There's such a thing as favorites and dislikes. Being a mother to a 6-year-old involved a lot of things. When it came to Issei, Mickey definitely had her work cut out for her. So imagine her surprise when she ends up also taking in little Ophis. Perhaps not in an official way, considering that they're under the idea of just staying with them for the time being, though she does have her opinions as to what to do regarding that. When comparing both children, it was like night and day, figuratively and literally, where Ophis was a lot less expressive, quiet and reserved. Issei wore his emotions on his sleeve and brought boundless energy to the table. Ophis was very quiet while Issei was very vocal. Ophis's expression changed so minutely whenever she enjoyed something, whereas Issei was a lot more vocal. Ophis wore dark colors, whereas Issei wore bright. Sure, she had tried to get Ophis in pastel pink once, but she had been very adamant against it. Something about how it hurt the eyes, and it didn't fit her color scheme. Hadn't Issei once said that she looked good in black, purple and white? Heh. Nevertheless, Mickey quite enjoyed having two adorable little munchkins to adore. Neither gave her any trouble, as far as she was concerned. In any case, she knew all well, most things about Issei. Ophis was still relatively new to the family, so there was still much to learn about the little darling. "No thank you." What she said. And she, just like any children, has very strong food preferences, it seemed. For some reason, seeing Ophis push her plate of greens away from her came as a weird shock. Perhaps she'd assumed that she would have been fine with eating anything. The girl had never complained about anything before. Until now, it seemed, and she is reminded all over again that the little girl in front of her is indeed a child. More so in some situations, and certainly now. "Ophis, dear, you need to eat your vegetables if you want to grow up strong and healthy," she said in a kind voice, using that special technique every parent learns called persuasion. Works wonders most of the time. "But you don't insist this hard with Issei." A fair point to be made, and for once, she cursed her inability of playing fair with everyone. At times, she's subjected to bouts of favoritism, be it one or another with either child. And it looks like it's coming to bite her back now. "Yeah, Mom. That's a little unfair," Issei said in a mock-upset tone, all but giving it away with the way the corners of his lips keep twitching upwards. "But keep doing it. Issei. I'm joking, but yeah, we don't want to eat these." But you need to, Mickey sighed. Vegetables, just like fish and rice and egg practically everything else, really are very important for good growth. And they make your trip to the toilet much easier. They give you smoother poopies. Don't ever say that in front of another person. But yes, Issei, they do indeed give you smoother poopies. That was easily the most innocent and also uncomfortable way to phrase it ever. And other veggies, like carrots, can give you good eyesight. And broccoli is especially good. We eat our tomatoes. Issei beamed. Beside him, Ophis nodded just as proudly. That you do, but that's just one vegetable in, like, millions. What others do you eat? Carrots, corn, potatoes. And how many do you not eat? Mom, I'd need a dictionary for that. She almost snorted at that, hiding her quirked lips by ruffling her son's head, getting him to laugh. Don't go smart on me. The fact of the matter is, there's so many vegetables that you don't eat. And that's not very good. Uncle doesn't eat his peas, and you're not upset with him. That got her to perk up. What? Oh yeah. Dad doesn't eat peas, Issei shrugged. I remember because, that one time you made us fried rice, it was really good. He put aside all his peas. I'm pretty sure he mashed them together and hid them with the onions. Outside, where he was currently walking in the neighborhood park, Hyoudou felt a weird chill go down his spine. Maybe he'll walk for a little longer. I see, so there's 3 picky eaters in this family. She'll definitely have a word with her husband later. Well, alright. But still. Veggies. Don't like 'em. Not delicious. Judging by their tones, they wouldn't be budging on that. Mickey recognized that much. Not for the first time, she has to contend with the age-old question of how a parent is meant to get her children to eat things that are good for them, but that they don't like. More specifically, the question of how to get children to eat vegetables, which she's sure even emperors and kings had headaches dealing with. She'll admit, it's not the easiest thing. Children can be incredibly stubborn at times, so it's almost impossible to get them to do anything that they might not like. And forcing the issue is only going to make them resist even harder. Which is where creative thinking comes into play once more. Skills and knowledge she'd honed during her time as a mother must now be used once more, and whether she could succeed or not. Well, she was never one to run away from a challenge. I would say yes, dear, but there's such a thing as crossing the line. And I don't know if I'm ready to do just that. Mickey rolled her eyes. Oh, don't need to be so dramatic, you silly goose. It's to help the kids. Well, yes, but. She gave him the look. The one that promised absolute disappointment in him if he refused to participate. That was enough to get him to shut up and nod obediently. Great. It was a while before dinner came around, so they had all the time to just chill around the house, well, the kids and her husband, that is. In the meantime, she was busy gathering all kinds of ingredients for her experiment. She ignored her husband's anxious look throughout the entire process. See, if there's one thing that Mickey's realized as she grew up, it's that some things can't be solved in a 1+1 sort of fashion. Thinking outside the box is incredibly important, and it's something the kids will come to learn as they grow older. Humming to herself, the Hyoudou matriarch looked through several cookbooks and busied herself in the kitchen. Well, more than usual, that is, for she was preparing all kinds of things with the use of all the vegetables they had in the fridge. Anything that she could make, be it a dish or a drink, she was making as diverse of a selection as possible. Sure, the kids might be turned off right away, but if they think they were stubborn as mules, she'll show them that she could be much worse. I'm not the best at decorating these platters, but I'll try my best. Night falls upon Japan once more, like any other day, and it must have already been that time of the day, because Goro heads into the kitchen to tell her. She hums back, making a few final touches before she has him help her carry all her creations to the table. And, just as she'd expected, the excited looks on the kids' faces turned upside down faster than Goro, making that one sharp turn at the corner of the road when he was trying to race her to the hospital back in the day. That was one hell of a drive, that was for certain. How they managed to reach the hospital alive and well was up for debate, but she wasn't one to ignore her lucky stars. Now, don't need to act like it's the end of the world. It definitely feels like it, since you're making dinner out of the things we hate, he muttered blankly, Ophis nodding absent-mindedly beside him. Oh, hush. I promise you'll enjoy them, she hummed back, grinning. If anything, the entire selections on the table were all very colorful and lovely smelling. There was a lot, she would say, but all of them were in smaller portions. And that was for a reason. So basically, we're going to be playing a little game tonight, the children looked at her questioningly. Here's how it'll go. All 4 of us are going to eat each one of these together. The one who eats the least amount of things will, her eyes gazed over to the kitchen. Wash all of the dishes. You can't be serious. Oh no. Even me? Yes, dear, you will be involved too, she ignored Goro's whine. The epitome of a grown-up, he is. So yes, that's how the game will go. Hopefully that's an incentive for all of you to work hard to eat all of these things, okay? And that was why she'd prepared so many things. Sure, they were all in small portions, but the number of plates totaled around 15 at least, with 4 glasses of drinks. She had no doubt in her mind that no one here looked forward to doing the dishes. Right now, pitted with the choice of facing their hated Vijas or trapped in a tiresome chore, it was a moment of do or not die. Just do the food eating or do the dishes. Just one of those. Strictly no dying. And what if we don't finish them? Issei asked. A very good question. Don't worry. So long as everyone gets a taste of each one, then that's fine. If there are any extras, we'll store them for later. She didn't miss the way the children's expressions turned mournful when told that. Dramatic, all of them. There's such a thing as favorites and dislikes, part 2. Vegetable number 1. Spinach. Oh, we have to start with the gross stuff first. You would call it gross right off the bat, but I assure you, this one will be the tastiest one yet. The child should not be capable of such a doubtful look, yet here he is, giving her a look that would make a cynic green with envy. Even Ophis was being influenced by him, breaking out of her typically expressionless look to stare at her unhappily. Well, she supposed she can't blame them. As hard as she tried, most of the things she made tonight are green. She hadn't been able to completely hide the colors or anything. Fortunately. The first thing you'll be having is the prettiest looking drinks right in front of you. Seeing their expressions turn into abject shock upon hearing her words was the funniest part for the time being, though it became even better when they, and even Goro, reached for the drinks right away. When Issei sucked away at the straw, his hum of joy could not have been louder. Even Ophis seemed to beam with happiness, for as unnoticeable as it could have been for most people. So sweet. To be fair, there's only like a fourth of a cup's worth of spinach in here, but it's still there, she shrugged. Mostly has strawberries, yogurt and some orange juice, so you're not exactly tasting the spinach. But still, it's important that you still get it inside of your system, you know. So this still works out. Honestly, this one was her favorite to make. It still gets the spinach in it, but it certainly won't taste like it, so that'll make it much more palatable to the children. Even her husband seemed to be enjoying it. But as she listed off the ingredients and preparatory steps behind the drink, she realized that no one was actually paying her any attention, likely still focused on the tasty drink and chatting about it with each other and not her. That's fine. Not like she was hoping for them to compliment her or anything. Well, she deadpanned in her mind, sipping on her own drink, melting in delight from its blend of sweetness and sourness. I suppose they should get the opportunity to enjoy this for now. No idea how the next few would go. Vegetable number 2. Cauliflower. The next dish to try sat in a green bowl filled with macaroni and what looked like very mushy mashed potatoes, which was, in fact, not potatoes. When asked on what it was, she simply suggested that they give it a try first. It looks gross, was Ophis's opinion on appearances alone. It looks gross, but I can promise you that it tastes good, Mickey hummed back with a smile. Go ahead. Give it a try. I'll go first, Issei said, scooping some of the supposed mac and cheese onto his own plate. Yosh, let's do this, with a firm nod, he plants his spoon into his meal and scoops out a relatively sizable mound. Hesitation danced in his eyes, but he braced himself for it nevertheless, pushing it into his mouth. Well? How is it? He took a moment to chew before swallowing. What is this? You said it was cauliflower. Yes, it is. I made it into a macaroni and cheese sort of thing. What do you think? I like the flavor, he said. Don't like the texture. Ophis and Goro tried the dish as well, both of them saying the same thing, that because it was so mushy, it was a little uncomfortable on the tongue. When she tried it, she found herself agreeing wholeheartedly. The cheese flavor was great, but it was certainly set back by the idea that she was eating glue. When it went down her throat, her whole body convulsed, practically begged her to throw it all up. She let out a quiet sigh of relief once she got it down. Oh well. You can't win them all. There's at least a fail for every win every once in a while. Maybe the next few ones will work. Vegetable number 3. Kale. If the previous one looked unpalatable, this one looked downright terrifying, at least, she imagines it must be for the children. Her husband fared a little better, though she would certainly keep in mind that he certainly had a thing against kale as he did peas, apparently. Mom? Why? Because it's for your own good, who knows how many times she's repeated that already. Still, fact was fact, and the only thing people can do is deal. Why? Ophis mumbled, dejected. Do all good things look so bad? Ouch. Not like it was her who prepared it or anything. What's in it, Mom? Baked kale, which you will eat with salsa, she gestured to the little sauce bowl filled with red. That'll help with the flavors a bit. It helped with the flavors a lot, it turns out, because baked kale has that distinct taste of vegetables very much. The salsa's tangy sourness worked very well for what would have otherwise been relatively tasted and dry. Goru takes one for the team and decides to bite into the kale without anything else. His thin lips and taut muscles spoke enough. Vegetable number 4. Beet. Oh god, mom. Why is it so pink? It's beet hummus. I don't even know what hummus is. I actually feel like I might throw up just from looking at it. Oh, hush you. Just give it a try. Office. Very well. Everyone, wish me luck. So? How is it? It's actually pretty good. The color was concerning at first, however. Duly noted. Do I have to eat this? Issei, you've eaten everything thus far. You skip this, you're cleaning the dishes. Goru, the same goes to you. Yes, dear. Yes, mom. Vegetable number 5. Potato. Are you kidding me? I love mashed potatoes. This is amazing. Thank you, auntie. Nikki did not bother hiding her grin at watching the kids dig into their bowls of mashed potatoes, topped with some gravy and a sprinkling of powdered parmesan. Of all vegetables, it seemed that children enjoyed potatoes the most, especially when mashed. Seems to be a staple for them. This is a nice change of pace, Goru hummed, smiling at her. He looked much more relaxed than he had been mere moments ago. Hot mashed potato is always nice. It is, right. Potatoes are the best when mashed. And you even sprinkled some cheese to this. He laughed. And here I thought we'd only get vegetables we won't like. Well, having one good thing every now and then is okay too, am I right? She shrugged. That was the wrong thing to say, for the children immediately gave her the suspicious looks. Is the next one bad? You don't know that. Haven't the ones so far been relatively okay? Well, yeah, but a good thing usually comes before something bad does, right? Well, that's a little cynical. Vegetable number 6. Pea. I knew it. It was too good to be true. Issei shouted in dismay. Beside him, the black-haired girl looked as if she'd just been told that the world was about to end and she'd skipped multiple stages to just head into depression. It's not that bad. Mom. It literally looks like baby vomit. No offense. A little taken, but I suppose it's fair. This should be pea puree and it's only bright green because it has avocado in it. That was enough to make the kids perk up a little. Avocado. Goru hummed. So it has some fruit in it too. That's nice. I mean, I doubt even I'd be able to handle it if it was just peas. Mom, you promise this won't send me to the hospital. Dramatic. Just to prove a point or likely to get him to stop complaining so much, she ate a spoonful of puree. She paused at first, brows furrowing as she tried to understand what the flavors, then shrugged as she finally swallowed it. Is it bad? It's got flavor. No one complained when they tried it next, although she had a feeling that the next time she tried to serve this at the table, they actually might just throw up. She'll see if she could tweak the recipe a little more in the future. Vegetable number 7. Zucchini. What even is this vegetable? I dunno. I just saw it in the fridge and thought I may as well just use it. We never even ate this before. How much longer, Issei? Somehow, the life of a parent was a kind of rollercoaster. And tonight proved to be one heck of a topsy-turvy. There were many things to be said about what had transpired in the Hyoudou household that night. And if one had gone and asked the people inside what their opinions had been, there would have been quite a number of things to be said. Issei would have called dinner exhausting. Ophis would have stayed silent, albeit with a sick expression on her face. Goru would have said that all's well that went well. And Mickey? Well. Despite being the instigator behind tonight's event, after she was done with it all, she was officially done with vegetables. She doubted she'd be fine eating another veg dish anytime soon. And, judging by the looks on everyone else's faces, they were too. It took a while to finally get through everything that she made, and by the time they were done, it was 10:30. It shouldn't have taken that long, but for how much work they, and by they, she meant the children, had to put in to clear out everything, it really had been time-consuming. Issei downed another glass of the smoothie she had made, the only true success that she'd managed to make thus far. Aw man, that was tough. Not the kind of dinner I would have thought I'd be doing in, like, ever. Well, there's a first for everything, is there? Mickey sighed, the taste of zucchini still on her tongue. So it wasn't the best. But hey, what's done is done. So, what's the lesson that we can all take from this? Vegetables are the worst. We should only be carnivores from now on. You're a great cook. Mickey sighed another time. Thank you for your opinion, Issei. And no, Ophis, eating only meat is not good for your growth. And Goru. Hey now, I complimented you. Yes, and I appreciate that. I was just trying to figure out how to say it after the children practically dumped me with some, let's call it, niceties. To his credit, Issei managed to look a little sheepish. Sorry mom. Vegetables just don't taste great, you know. I do know that. I was a kid once too, and I absolutely hated my greens back in the day, she smiled back, which helped ease her kid. I can't exactly blame you two for not liking them right away. I'd only be a hypocrite, wouldn't I? But they're important for us, Ophis said. Right. Indeed. And it's usually the things that don't taste the best that are good for you, vegetables, medicine, oats. And it makes some amount of sense, right? Things that have so much sugar in them might be delicious, but eating too much of them would give you diabetes. She nodded with her husband. Precisely. Moderation in everything, especially your diet, is important if you don't want to get sick and get all your nutrients. But is it fine if we ate too much vegetables tonight? I mean, if you don't eat enough, your stool your poop. Not the chair comes out really hard. And if it's too much, it comes out too soft. Basically diarrhea, she chuckled back at the children's collective groans. Oh, don't worry. This is just a one-time thing. Even I wouldn't be able to survive if I just ate all of this every night. But I like the smoothie. When she met Ophis's eyes, she nodded. And I heard that mashed pumpkin is delicious. And the kale with the salsa was a little better, Issei grinned back. Honestly wouldn't say I like the cauliflower mac and cheese either, but if it doesn't taste like slime, I'd eat it again. MMHM. The cheese tasted great. I know, right? Pretty sure we're not supposed to eat too much cheese, though. But man, does it taste great. As the two children fell into a little discussion regarding the meals they had tonight, Mickey couldn't help but feel a little touched. Even if tonight had been a vegetable disaster, that they'd gone so far as to humor her and ended up enjoying some of the meals she made was a kind of satisfaction she could get behind. A hand on hers draws her gaze over to her husband's, who watches him with that calm joy of his that always works to make her feel over the moon. Thinking back on it now, she'd gone ahead and done all of this because she just wanted to prove a point, though what that is, it's lost on her now. If anything, all she managed to get out of all of this is enjoyment for the ability to spend time with her kids. Quietly, she looked over to Issei. Her little munchkin is sipping on his drink with gusto, Ophis matching his pace to see who could finish theirs the first. They're both smiling. Or at least Issei is, but Ophis has that gleam in her eyes that reflects joy. Issei, he looks so happy. Mickey sits with her back against the door, listening to her son's raspy breathing on the other side. He's crying, she realizes, but he doesn't want the world to hear him, so he tries his best to keep it in. How long had it been since she last saw him cry? Mickey couldn't remember. At the time, the one person he could truly call his friend had left with her family for England. And he hadn't been the same ever since for days on end. She wished she could have done something to help him. To alleviate his pain. To do away with that loneliness. And yet, here he is, so much happier than he had ever been, smiling brighter than the sun itself. Mickey hopes to have even more of these moments with her family. And who knows? Perhaps in the future, their days will grow even crazier. Let's never do this again, okay? Agreed. I'm fine if everyone agrees. Mickey, dear. Ridiculous, all of them. Mickey doesn't try to hide her eye roll. Fine only because I love you all. Love you too, Mom. Being a mother rocks. These are dinosaurs. Issei nodded back, pointing to the biggest one there. Yep. They apparently lived millions of years ago back on Earth. Something real big happened, not sure if it's climate change, but some people say it's a huge asteroid from space and almost all dinosaurs went extinct. She hummed, taking in the appearance of the odd reptilian creature. Some of them had really peculiar features like 3 horns on their heads, shell-covered bodies and feathers, despite not being bird-like in appearance, and one such example that flies apparently doesn't have feathers. Some live in the sea while others were on the ground, but every single one of them qualified as dinosaurs, despite their greatly differing characteristics. Could these be 6-8wo's ancestors? Perhaps, though for some reason, 6-8wo strikes her as some kind of sci-fi abomination than prehistoric reptiles. It was a sunny day out, though a little hotter than to her liking. Both children were currently in the living room, discussing these extinct creatures. She had been bored and wanted something to do, and fortunately Issei had a solution, as he always does. One thing led to another, and the mention of dinosaurs ended up with him bringing out an encyclopedia that he kept in his room. This wasn't exactly how she expected the day to go, to be honest, but it's nice to just chat about stuff with him from time to time. He makes for a very enthusiastic and chatty partner. They look very different from one another, she commented. The one that he'd pointed at was something called a Tyrannosaurus, standing on 2 legs with 2 little hands and a massive body and head. The Ankylosaurus looked like a turtle covered with such thick plating and with a clubbed tail. And the pterodactyl is some kind of bird-bat hybrid with a lack of feathers and a skin webbing of sorts. No 2 dinosaurs looked any similar to each other. A biological diversity that would make them really popular in a zoo for children, she bet, though it's a shame that they're already extinct. Right. And for some, there are those that look pretty close to each other, so it's hard to differentiate them all that well. You wouldn't really have that problem now. Most times. Most times, he conceded. And from what I know, most of these guys are all carnivores. Would have been a disaster if they still exist now and we had to live with them. That's true. She can't imagine just how insane that would be, though she had a feeling the humans now would probably adapt well to the changes. Do you have any favorites? That's a hard choice, Issei put on a serious thoughtful look. And by serious, it really wasn't. I mean, all of them look pretty cool. But if I had to choose then maybe this one, he tapped his finger on one. She peered over to follow his trajectory. The Triceratops, she read. Looks like a rhinoceros. Right. Sort of like a rhino, but with a wider sized head and what sort of looks like a beak. Must be heavy to move its head around. They certainly are strange, though I suppose they would be strange if we judged them based on our standards. In that time, however, such might have been normal. Right? He nodded back, grinning. It's sort of like how we're used to the idea that there are lizards no bigger than our arm, well, household lizards, I mean, so those are pretty small. But then, back in the day, there are all these big lizards walking around. And if people existed in that time, they probably wouldn't have batted an eye because that's what's normal to them. Certainly. And it speaks a lot of the humans of this modern age. Or at least, the civilians that make up the majority of the global population, who go on with their everyday lives, completely unaware of the strange things that exist alongside them, just like Issei who doesn't realize he's sitting beside a dragoness. Sure, there are exceptions, like those who actually work alongside the devils, angels and fallen angels, either as reincarnated beings or just human agents. And perhaps there are those who are involved with extraterrestrials or otherworldly entities like SCP-682. Something about it tells her that he had some amount of interaction with humans, considering its apparent distaste of them. And yet, somehow, humans manage to be so unaware of the strange things in their lives. Or perhaps those in power work behind the shadows to keep them from the reach of all the abnormalities, just like in some of the stories she's read. How about you, Ophis? Issei's voice dragged her back to earth. You got a favorite dinosaur? Myself. She hummed, scanning through the pages she was on. She then flipped the book a few pages left and right, trying to find one, before shrugging. Not a fan. Really? He seemed surprised by that. Why's that? They simply do not resonate with me. I find no such interest in them. Not even one of them. Not even one, she shook her head. Apologies. Nah, it's fine. Not everyone likes dinosaurs. Some like other things, like puppies and birds. I mean, it would be pretty hard to like something that doesn't exist anymore, he makes a good point. She nodded to show her agreement. How about you? Got a favorite animal? Dragons? The answer came so quickly and so direct that even Ophis was a little surprised with herself. Her friend goes ooh. Brown eyes twinkling in interest. Dragons, you say? Now that's a medieval taste if I've ever heard one. He grinned. And that's a really wide base to cover, since a lot of cultures have dragons. Asian, Western, and they look different based on which culture, just like dinosaurs. She hadn't expected him to be so enthusiastic about what she'd practically brought up on a whim, though she wasn't going to complain. You seem to know a lot about dragons. Dragons are really popular in video games and anime, and there's all kinds of them. There's those that breathe fire and fly in the sky, or the ones that swim in the ocean. I remember a storybook series that's about dragons too, and in that one, there are dragons that live in deserts, and some that are plant-like in characteristics. The plant-like dragon. Now, it was her turn to be fascinated. I've never heard of a dragon like that before and never seen one in reality before, either. Me neither, but it was pretty cool. I saw a picture of it once on the internet and its wings literally look like leaves. Sort of reminds me of all those leaf insects that you see in books. Well, now she wonders if it's an actual thing. If not, she'd have to give humans the credit for being so creative. Actually, yeah. What's your favorite kind of dragon, Ophis? Favorite kind of dragon? Now that's a difficult question if she has ever heard of one. In truth, Ophis hadn't thought to bring up the topic of dragons to begin with. She would have been content discussing dinosaurs with Issei, even if she hadn't seen the appeal of them, sorry, Issei, all that much, but then she'd accidentally mentioned them. And now, here she was, with a particular bias of hers showing considering that she herself was a dragon, it wouldn't be difficult to understand why she would favor them above anything else. But it's one thing to favor herself since she's a dragon, and another to like another dragon species. Favoritism is a little strong here, and she had never really given much thought to other dragons. I can't really say, partly because she really had no obvious favorites, and partly because she wasn't sure how to describe herself. But, recognizing it wouldn't be fair to give him an answer, she settled on the following. If I had to choose one, it'd be black dragons. Black dragons? As in night dragons. Shadows. Yin and yang. I just like the color. She cringed as she said that, realizing that it was a rather lame excuse. She couldn't even think of a suitable answer to give. And yet, Issei, being the good sport that he is and never a judgy person with another, nodded. That makes sense. Black is a pretty cool color. Like, I know a lot of people relate it to death and stuff, but it's like, mystical. Mysterious. He didn't need to assuage her all that much, but she appreciated it, giving her the momentum to add more. Indeed. And it is much easier on the eyes compared to any other colors. True that. Because some colors are just so bright and sharp, black is like the complete opposite, so anyone can like it. It literally looks good on anything, like cars. And the night sky. Horses too. Black stallions are really cool. And black kitties. Crows. Blackcurrant. I think blackcurrant is more dark purple than black, though. That's a little confusing. True. Ooh, black roses. The black sands in that one beach. And hair, like yours. She made to add another to the list, yet she was completely taken off guard by the comment. It was so sudden, so unexpected that it froze her in place. Her mind took a few seconds to properly understand what he'd said before she found herself looking away. My hair. Yeah. Like, I know it comes off as weird, but your hair is the silkiest I've ever seen. Not even mom's is as smooth as yours. And I wasn't kidding about it looking really pretty. You have really nice hair, Ophis. And now she found herself playing with her hair, looking further and further away from Issei's face. Thank you, she'll need to remember to put more effort into taking care of her hair, then. It hadn't been a point of focus for her before, but looks like that'll be changing today. Maybe she could ask Auntie for some help. And what about you, Issei? Do you have any, favorites? Easy. I like Drake. She froze up once more, but this time, it was out of surprise. Drake. Yeah. He's the red dragon in the flag of Wales. I think it's a city in UKO, wait, no. It's a country, actually. But yeah, he's on the flag. And why do you like him? I don't know, he's just cool, that simple answer had her genuinely sweat dropping. I mean, he's really red, and red's a great color. Red dragons look cool. A fair answer, and really in line with hers, so she couldn't fault him for that. But it was also a rather surprising choice, given the fact that Drake does indeed exist. Not just as a symbol on a flag, but an actual entity, Drake, the Red Dragon Emperor, and one of two heavenly dragons who fought a terrific battle with his counterpart to the point where the angels, devils and fallen angels teamed up against them to seal them away into two sacred gears. Not like Issei needed to know all of that, though. She'll just let him have his appreciation of a dragon just because its color is red. Hers is technically black, after all. I see. That's fair. Yeah, dragons are pretty cool. A little weird that they and dinosaurs are both reptilian. Makes you wonder if dragons existed too back in the day, they most certainly do, and still do even now. Cause imagine it. Before humans existed and there were all these big lizards flying around in the sky, hoarding treasure. Unbeknownst to the two of them, as they chat on about dragons and folktales in the living room, something stirs within the boy's soul. Even Ophis, who is well attuned to magic in the soul, is completely unaware of the change in her friend. It's not known what it is at the moment, but for some reason, it seems elated. Issei is indirectly affected by this, as he smiles a little more throughout the day. Anyone could guess why. In a world of modern technology. I want another smoothie. Another? Alright. Me too, Auntie. Thank you. Thank you, Mom. Nikki just rolled her eyes at her son's antics. Of course he'd forget courtesy at times, but leave it to Ophis to be the sweetheart that she is. Well, she can't blame him too much. That he bothered to remember it all should mean something, huh? She can't exactly remember the last and only time they'd had veg night, but out of all the creations that night, it had been the spinach smoothie that had been the best. Not sure if she can even call it that since it had more fruit than the actual vegetable, but it's the thought that counts. And hey. If it's something that they like very much, who was she to keep it away from them? As Mickey busied herself making the drinks, the children chatted away with one another and she couldn't help but titter at their topic of choice. Dinosaurs and dragons, eh? Such kiddish topics, though it felt fitting enough of them. They are children, after all. Personally, she was more of a fan of watching kitten videos. Not the most original, but even 10 seconds clips of those are just good enough. She always did appreciate the cuter things than the big ones. Alright, 2 glasses of spinach berry smoothies on the way. Maybe you could take out the spinach completely, Mom. Nope. Not like you'd even taste them. Issei and Ophis are all too happy to take deep gulps of their drinks, making their enjoyment of her creation very vocal. She's all too pleased by that, of course after all, she did make it with her heart and soul. Sure, they'd more or less hated just about everything else, but she supposed one couldn't win all battles. How easy life would be if that were the case. Say, Mom. How'd you get the idea to make this? Saw it in a recipe book and I got curious. Wait. You actually have a cookbook? Like, a hard copy? It's one that my mother gave to me as a kid, so I'd kept it around just because I wanted to, she shrugged back. Wasn't expecting to use it, but it had a lot of recipes for vegetable dishes, so I got inspired to make that little dinner. Erg. Never want to go through that again. Both Issei and Ophis looked sick at the prospect. Still, Mom, Issei continued. I'm surprised that you'd have one at all. Most people just use their phones. That was true. In this digital age, cookbooks have easily become an unneeded part in today's society. Makes cookbooks even more obsolete when recipes online are free, understandable, and can even come with tutorial videos. Why go out of your way to go to a store and buy it when you can get everything you need in your phone? Do people dislike reading physical books? Not necessarily, Ophis. Even now, there are plenty who prefer having a book in hand rather than a small little gadget, hummed Mickey. Still, with how convenient things have become, things have slowly transitioned away from traditional mediums into the more modern things. Not to say that it's a bad thing, but it'll always be different from how it was. Like this. People used to go to stores to buy books and newspapers, which helps the publishing companies. But when people start using their phones instead, all of a sudden, those companies who strictly relied on publishing are going to get hurt. So they'd have to adapt and figure out a way to fit in with the changing times, or be left behind. That's rather depressing. It certainly is, she sighed. Things have become a lot better now that technology has gotten more and more advanced. Entertainment, food, information, and especially healthcare, but there are some things that suffer for it. Not like any of it is intentional. But when you turn to something new, there's no avoiding some cons along the way. It's like the veg meals you made. They're healthy but don't taste great. They taste great, what are you talking about? She tutted, though without any actual heat. Even she didn't dare to bite into the kale bowl without salsa as her husband did. How do people keep getting ideas to make new things all the time? Ooh. Now this is the kind of topic that she wouldn't exactly discuss with a child, but Ophis is nothing if not curious of just about everything. And as far as she knew, nurturing a mind that always questions everything around them allows for healthy mental growth. Honestly, I'm not sure. It's always a matter of creativity and innovation, which is thinking up of new ideas and then actually putting them into practice respectively. People just have a tendency to notice things, see the problem, figure out a way to fix it, and then want to make something to solve it. Sometimes, they're in it for the money or fame. Some people are simply altruistic, while others are pragmatic. Self-serving or selfless. Either way, technology will always keep changing, so that's that. A little Ophis looked at her with surprise and interest, black eyes wide like an owl's. Fascinating. A lot of things really do happen in the background. We don't really give these sorts of things any consideration most of the time, but to the people who invent these things, they have to put in a lot of thought into a lot of things, how it can help everyone, how it'll impact their lives, how it can get better. That's just a normal thing, huh? We don't like being inconvenienced, so we keep trying to make things better for ourselves. Inconvenienced, he says. Did my son eat a dictionary? Her little quip got him to giggle, making her grin. Well, however we look at it, things won't stop moving forwards. If anything, people'll keep figuring out ways to make more news things and stuff. All we can do is just be smart when using them and make the authorities aware of any possible problems. Really? Why is that important? It's like beta testing for a game. Point out a flaw and let the developers fix the problem so that, when the product gets released again or properly, it would be perfect and usable by the public. Then no one would complain about it or get angry. And, more importantly, the user's safety is guaranteed. I see. That is a very good beepachi, Auntie. Of all things to be complimented, that wasn't it? She couldn't help but chuckle. Thank you. It's always important to get your message across, and sometimes in creative ways, so that's that. It became much easier for you to understand it, didn't it? Yes, it did. I can't imagine a life without technology, Issei mused with a thoughtful hum. Not to say that I wouldn't like living in the countryside, because we've done that plenty of times, but with how normal it feels to have them in our lives, now them going away would be like stepping back in time. We'd probably get used to it given time, but it would definitely take some trying to readjust. Still sounds tough. For certain. With technology being a part of every aspect, to suddenly lose all of that would set them back into the dark age. Agriculture, medicine, housing, security technology played such major parts in those necessary fields that they would take a heavy hit if the machines and knowledge behind them were to disappear. She can't help but wonder what it must be like for the kinds of people who willingly live in the wilderness, or at least away from the touches of civilization. Where there was no such thing as Wi-Fi or phones. Where every day is more or less the same as the one before, lacking the need to check messages or watch online videos. How would that be like? Would things be more difficult than they are now, or a lot more simple? Perhaps the latter, though logically simpler in some things but harder in others. That was simply the way it has to be. Well, for better or worse, tech is going to be a part of their lives for a pretty long time. She doubted they'll be going without them for a very long time. Though she had to wonder what the life of one without such modernity is like. Wilderness-style culinary. The rabbit family is a perfect embodiment of a prey, an animal that sits down on the bottom of the food chain, serving as a source of food for the predator. It was fast, small, but helpless in a fight, leading one to wonder what its purpose is in the grand scheme of existence. Without going too deep into the subject, the animal serves as a foundation of the ecosystem. It provides stability and balance in a way that it itself is unaware of, but that which has been passed down as common knowledge amongst the humans. And in this moment, as the creature stared up at its hunter the clearly not an animal, it was all it could think of to wonder just what it is looking at before tendrils wrapped around its throat. And snapped. SCP-682, on the other hand, watched the creature drop limp before letting out a pleased sigh. Carefully, it picked up the dead little thing and walked off to return to its camp. Strange how my body has adapted well to needing sustenance like any other creature, but I'm not going to complain that it's one of the best things ever. Truly, this is an experience unlike any other. 680 understood that this was a luxury to itself, unlike every other organism that actively need to eat others or make their own food to survive. For 680, it could easily remove its stomach to get rid of hunger from the equations for itself after all, how else would it have then survived back in the facilities? But this was a nice feeling. To feel alive. To truly be alive. That was a thing it had sadly missed out on during its time in the facility, treated as such a dangerous monster that needed to be destroyed no matter what. Deserved since it does have a hate-hate relationship with humanity, but still. Rude. It took no more than 4 minutes to return to its current spot. It was against a small cliffside, carved inwards to give it room to lay down. A single flat rock sat a foot away, with a couple pieces of lumber that it had broken off from a tree with its own claws stacked neatly near its resting place. 680 deposited the rabbit atop the flat rock. 2 fish and another rabbit. The hunt today had gone relatively well. The forest is rich, habitat to so many, it hummed to itself, walking over to pick up a limber with a new limb, grown from the side. Hopefully, these creatures aren't endangered. It would be poor sportsmanship to hunt dying species. Not like the humans care. No. Because it's exotic, the price of its fur and ivory would be off the roof, making them prime targets for poachers and the like. Bah. Humans and their greed. They'd draw lines, yet so many would ignore them if they could make a pretty coin for themselves. Fortunately, SCP-682 was nothing if not meticulous. Scouting out the habitat, it had determined which species are numerous and populous, just to be sure that it wouldn't accidentally hunt the wrong animals. Hey, just because it's a human-hating biological nightmare from space or some nonsense, it still had standards. And if this made it much better than the humans, then one can be sure it would do whatever it wishes to stoke its own ego. Though, their knowledge isn't something I would particularly dislike. As it said that, it prepared a basic fireplace, stacking leaves and sticks atop a couple of lumber. Afterwards, it adapted a feeler, filled to the brim with chemicals that immediately ignited when it struck the bulbous end against the stack. It was just a little spark, starting an ember that eventually grew into a proper blaze. Eventually, smoke billowed into the air. Satisfied, 680 decided to skin the rabbits before it snatched up its quarries and lifted them above the fire. From what it could remember, direct contact with the fire isn't what's used to cook the meat. That would only carbonize the meat, if it isn't mistaken. Instead, it's the heat wafting off the fire in the form of radiation that actually cooks up the food. The smoke will provide an additional taste. 680 did not have to deal with pangs of hunger or impatience. It had all the time in the world to simply lay there, watching the fires lick upwards as the meat slowly turned color, promising a kind of succulent hardness that effectively whetted its appetite. If another SCP had once told 680 that it would be sitting in the middle of the forest cooking fish like some kind of camper, it would have laughed in their face and probably go out on a killing spree with the humans, just because. But for it to be reality now. Humming a tune to itself, the beast sat there for a little longer before finally bringing the food to itself. Appreciation with all senses, it reminded itself, allowing its gaze to linger upon its meal with satisfaction. Not the best work, but it was still palatable, black around the edges and a yummy-looking brown. The rabbit was the same, a very welcoming shade of brown and black of very tender meat. Biting into the fish, flavors burst into existence upon its tongue, and 680 could not stop itself from moaning in delight. Crispy meat was just all too delicious, and it got to taste 2 different kinds, the softer and flavorful fish and the greatest tenderness of rabbit. Topped with some colorful berries that it had picked from the deeper parts of the forest, the beast's dinner was a particularly enjoyable one. Certainly more than human ever was, those were just a part of the slaughter process, but that didn't make them delicious. Rabbit, for how much smaller it is than human, packed way more tastiness. Meat cooked over the fire is plenty good already, though I should probably look into finding herbs of sorts. Truth be told, SCP-682 didn't know how to cook, which was completely fair, since it had never dealt with that sort of thing before. Plus, there weren't any modern tools that it had on hand to just do whatever humans do to cook stuff. But making food was not limited purely to modernity. After all, if that was the case, then they would have been screwed for a very long time since the dawn of humanity. When all they had was gibberish for language and sticks and stones as weapons. They were inventive in that sort of way from a very long time, as much as it hated to admit. Now, though, it had many years to learn how to take care of itself. And what an exciting thought that was. Quite a nomad's way of life, but no less satisfying when it's my own freedom that I get to appreciate. Lying on a bed of sticks and leaves, the dampness seeping through its skin and offering a gentle cooling sensation that relaxes every muscle in its body. As it does so, it simply watches the fire in the center of the clearing, still flickering away and bathing the area in a warm glow. Admittedly, it hadn't expected itself to be able to do so well out here in such a vastly different and wild environment on its own as it is now. Perhaps the stakes aren't all that high, since none of the animals here could prove any feasible danger to it, and its biological adaptations naturally halt aging and physical deterioration and mutation, so it was practically safe from anything. But for it to somehow be capable of hunting well, locating safe spots and figure out simple ways to cook food and the like must be some kind of survival instinct ingrained in every organism's genes. For a moment, it wonders if every living thing could adapt so well when suddenly placed in a new, dangerous environment on its own. Some might not be able to, it acknowledges that, but perhaps it is simply the strength of the will to face the challenge head-on. Another might comment that cowards will be the first to die, but 6-8 will like to think that it was all a matter of perspective. Would that individual be too afraid that they would then do nothing, or would they be so afraid of dying that they would then try anything and everything to survive? In that sort of matter, it fell down to the individual to either be held back or be spurred by their fear. I'll never be able to empathize with them on that, it muttered to itself. I've never had the opportunity to experience fear before. Except that one time when it had encountered the Dragoness office, who had easily slaughtered all those magicians with a kind of ease that would have made the containment facility workers quake in their boots. To be fair, it doubted there would have been anything that office could have done to it to eradicate its body. After all, it had never failed to regenerate its entire body after even 90% of its body was destroyed. But that didn't make it a suicidal idiot that couldn't recognize something dangerous. And Office, for how little she was not someone it would choose to fight any day. And she seems to have taken a liking to that boy, if the fact that she lives with him means anything. Odd. Not like that was its problem. Whatever she wanted to do was up to her. As a thunder roars in the distance and the skies begin to darken, SCP-682 decides that it would sleep the rest of the day away. It had hibernated plenty of times, but listening to the rain was beginning to become a fun little pastime. Its dream that night, long gone are those where it dreamt of escaping the facility and seeing the great world beyond, are filled with grilled rabbit and chicken meat. The animals in the surrounding bore witness to its occasional giggles in its sleep. The human world was filled with a lot of fascinating things. She'd acknowledged that the first night since she'd come here and the days ever since had been nothing but eventful and fun with the Hyoudous. Issei, especially, never fails to make even the most mundane things in life seem more lively than anything she's ever experienced. Of course, that wasn't to say that the human realm was perfect. There were plenty of downs to go with all its benefits, but they aren't usually all that bad. Sure, not everyone is completely friendly and the weather can get rather hot, but even she realizes that's nitpicking in the end. Ultimately, she was happy to say that she's happy to be here. To have somehow stumbled upon a boy in the middle of the night and somehow pulled into a warm and loving family despite having no ties with him. She thought she'd gotten used to solitude. Now, she couldn't want anything more than what she has now. Buzz. Buzz. Snip. Snip. She changed her mind. She didn't want to be here. Sitting in a little shop that seemed more like a corridor, with mirror attached to two opposite walls to give some kind of infinite reflection, Office felt oddly uncomfortable. The little shop wasn't too claustrophobic and she still had legroom. The floors were sanitized and the air smelt of freshener. She did not, however, appreciate the clumps of hair that was beginning to grow in size in front of her. This, Office realizes, is true hell. They were in his world now. The man who was doing away at her best friend with his horrifying tools and that smile that could fool millions of men and women into thinking he was friendly everyone but her. She knew the truth. She knew his plans. Knew that he was up to no good. "Hey now, you're looking a little tense." A little nudge to her side failed to elicit much response from her. Rather than get offended, Uncle simply chuckled. "Don't worry about him, Ophis. The guy's a professional. He won't hurt Issei by accident." Good, because if that were the case, then she was sure nothing in the world would stop her from destroying this shop and lightly sending this barber to another dimension. Likely without killing him, though. She had a feeling that no one would appreciate that, and even she had somehow developed a dislike for the idea of killing humans. She was not a religious person, but even now she'd ask for someone to spare her from having to remain in this hellscape for so long. That was quite the statement when even the actual underworld itself wasn't such a bad place. If anything, it seemed almost similar to Earth, what with its inhabitants mimicking much of the humans' lifestyles. Well, whatever seemed fit. It was also something to be considered that not many things actually bother Ophis whatsoever. Being one of the strongest beings in the known universe meant that very little posed a problem for her. And now that she's taken to living with the Hyoudous, there simply wouldn't be a need to confront such bad enemies. Not like a couple of stray devils hadn't tried and come on over to feast over her favorite family. She'd made sure to dispose each and every one of them without anyone the wiser. But still, humans managed to find some ways to entertain her or in this case, to traumatize her. Snip snip snip, looking rather nice now. Feels nice, doesn't it? Yeah, it sure does. And are you saying snip? You totally are. Ah, you got me there, kiddo. Now sit still for a moment while I… How could Issei be so cheery despite the fact that this horrible person was cutting away his hair with those oversized scissors? When all his precious brown strands are falling off onto the ground in tufts and clumps, waiting to be brushed away, collected and disposed in the trash. Ophis felt like she knew what fear was before. But if she hadn't, then she definitely does now. She literally couldn't help but wince every time his scissors got a little too close to his earlobe, or if he seemed to pull the comb a little too back, pulling Issei's hair with it. Everyone here is all too relaxed, she thought with a hint of disbelief, looking around. The other patrons of the shop were either sat at a couch pushed to a corner or on the seats being tended to by other barbers. A few gazes focused on her best friend as they smiled at his childish joy. Why are they so happy to cut away their hair? Is this some kind of horrible ritual? We've been wanting to get Issei a haircut for a while now, though we hadn't the opportunity for a bit, Uncle said beside her, as if he read her mind. She doubted he could, though that would be pretty cool. Is a haircut important? Usually, adults have to consider that for self-image. It's especially important to present a neat and tidy person when you're looking to score a job. Not like people with scraggly, unruly hair can't be hard workers, but first impressions are plenty important enough in life. That's certainly a social aspect that she hadn't considered thus far. Interesting. Would it count for children as well? Oh, most certainly. Not to belittle you or anything, not that she would be insulted in any way. She wasn't exactly a child to begin with, even if she may look the part. But children tend to judge others by appearance too, most of the time. They'd be careful who they'd want to be friends with based on how they look. Don't feel too bad about it, though. It's natural for everyone. Interesting, she'd always known that psychology was an interesting subject to tackle when it came to how humans socialize, but to think that something so basic as how one appears could drastically affect one's feelings toward them. Then again, she supposed he wasn't wrong. If she'd had to compare a man who looked like a beggar or another dressed in a suit, she'd have been of the opinion that the latter would be a businessman. Immediate inferences based on outward appearance. And it does help with one's health. It helps with hygiene and technically keeps the hair from getting damaged from things like sunlight and wetness, and then, he chuckled. Though, don't count my word on that last bit. I'm not exactly a medical professional. It's okay, Uncle. I learned quite a bit. Doesn't change the fact that she absolutely hates haircuts now. Even with Issei laughing away as the barber makes a comfortable shave on his sideburn, she doubted she would enjoy it. Say, Ophis, do you want to get a haircut too? I refuse. Any other time, she would have politely apologized to Uncle for being a little rude to him. But with such a dastardly question directed at her, she couldn't help but be equally blunt right back at him. Uncle just laughed back, but she would remain adamant in her stance. Never in her life will she ever cut her hair. Never. Ooh. So that's her reaction, eh? Yep. Guess she's not a big fan, he chuckled. She looked so glum throughout the walk back. Kept asking Issei why he wanted to get his hair cut in the first place. And his answer of because it was getting way too long did not please her in the slightest. Neither of them wanted to tell her it was because Goro and Mickey both thought it would be nice to get him to get a haircut to trim down his wild mane. They didn't expect Ophis to be so upset over it, which was equally funny as it was hilarious. So yeah, you could say that she absolutely dislikes getting haircuts. Like, at all. It's probably got to do with Issei complimenting her hair that one time, his wife tittered. She'd been so over the moon when he said that. Not like she outwardly showed it that much, obviously, but she had been asking so much questions about how to take better care of her hair afterwards. Oh? He leaned forwards, grinning widely. MMHM. She never really cared much for it before, but I noticed that she's been very meticulous with her hair ever since. Shampoo, conditioner, even hair oil. And she listens to all the instructions I give her. Not like she doesn't, but she's very attentive about it all. Ooh, that's adorable. Think she's trying to impress Issei? You kidding? She snorted, then giggled. At this rate, I don't doubt it. She adores Issei. Even with this little teasing session, Goro couldn't help but feel a little warm at hearing that. It is a testament to how close they are now, having already been a month since she'd first joined them, that he could no longer imagine what their life would be without her in it. In fact, even now, she's in the living room chatting with Issei, who had returned from a bath moments earlier with a towel over his head, about that one sushi shop they saw on the way here. Not a big fan, she is, though she isn't all too opposed to giving them a try every once in a while. Now that he thought about it, he's never found a moment where the two just aren't attached by the hips. He'd like to think that they're only ever separated whenever they're off to sleep in their separate bedrooms. Otherwise, they really might just end up sharing the room. Just like Ophis' first night, heh. Well, whatever the case is, even I wouldn't want Ophis to cut her hair. Me neither, nodded Goro, wise enough to know that disagreeing would have had his skin flayed. And I doubt she'd want to. With all those death glares she'd been giving the shop when they left the place. Yeah. Definitely not happening in a million years. Green thumb. Why is it called green thumb? I don't know. Issei answered with all the honesty of a child, managing to sound proud about it. I know that it's probably the Americans who came up with it. Westerners and Asians sure come up with a lot of proverbs and sayings. Yeah, that's true. Usually it's the old people who come up with these sorts of things. He wasn't exactly sure how they could manage to do that, but he wasn't going to question it. As far as he knew, old people tended to make up all kinds of phrases for all sorts of things and they usually don't make any sense in the latter manner. Like, why green thumb? Wouldn't people who realistically have those mean they have some sort of infection? Ugh. In any sense, I don't think it's just people living in the West and East who say weird things all the time. Pretty sure anyone from anywhere make up all kinds of things to say. True. Actually, now that he thought about it, hey mom, the woman in question, sitting at the couch with a look of focus as she tried to solve her crossword puzzle on her newspaper, hummed back in response. Do you and dad make up stuff to say to me in office from time to time? Don't be silly. We'd never do such a thing. Wasn't that what you said about the last time we had vegetables for dinner? Those are all facts, Issei, she rolled her eyes back. She wasn't wrong there, admittedly. You know that your father and I aren't fans of lying, even if it means telling little white lies. We try to be as honest as possible, either it's with you or everyone else. Well, I guess that's true. Plus, they literally named him Issei, which meant honesty. Would be pretty hypocritic to do that, but then go off to tell lies themselves. Something about adults being good role models for kids and the like. And what does having a green thumb mean? It means that you're really good at gardening, his mom answered without looking up from her puzzle. Her hand, holding a pen, moved down to scribble an answer. But why the thumb? Something about how a good farmer can tell if the soil needs watering or not just by putting their thumb in the dirt, she shrugged nonchalantly. I'm not exactly sure what's the reason, dearie, but that's the best I could give you. Would it be good if we do have green thumbs? Her question drew them into a momentary silence before the three of them collectively shuddered. Better not. No kiddin'. I'd like mine just as they are now. Same here. Oh, so this one is Aphrodite. Aphrodite? Ophis seemed to perk up at that. Probably a goddess of sorts. Not sure from where, though. She's a Greek goddess who represents love, passion, and recreation. I mean, reproduction. Think there's a saying about her? There's possibly a saying for every deity, she shrugged back. He could see that being the case if the Greeks were particularly devoted to them in any case, wanting to make up some kind of proverb including them to show their respect or something. Maybe I don't know. As blue as Poseidon. Both Ophis and his mom, who put down her papers for a moment to stop and stare at him. What? Why blue like Poseidon? I dunno. He's the king of the ocean, he shrugged back. And the ocean is blue. That is true. Now, Issei. Well, you're not wrong about the ocean being blue, I doubt that Poseidon himself is actually blue. Perhaps he's skin-toned, just like us. He supposed that was the case. If he wasn't, humans would likely be a little more afraid of him. Something to do with how similar they are in terms of appearances that there was no reason to be afraid of them in the first place. How about never look a gift horse in the mouth? He asked next, crossing his arms. I think that's a really weird one to think about. Like, who even looks in a horse's mouth? Horse dentists. He snapped his fingers at Ophis. You're right there. It means to not question a gift when it's given to you, though I like to think that it's a rather silly saying myself, his mom hummed. And also, don't be too excited whenever you get something for free. Be sure to thank them for the gift and at least consider, if only for yourself, just why exactly you got the gift in the first place. And never accept candy from strangers, especially if they just came out of a white van. What? Why? Because mom and dad says that's how kidnappers work, he nodded, certain of himself. They take a white van everywhere, find a kid, go and offer candy to them, then drag them into the van and drive off before anyone can rescue them, he shuddered after. It's awful. Indeed. So you two have to always be careful when you're out and about. I don't want to find out that something dangerous happened to the both of you, okay? Okay, they answered together. Good. Oh, wait, this one isn't melon. Well, darn. Leaving mom to her puzzle for a bit, he tried to wrap his head around the idea of proverbs, recognizing that they're never meant to be taken literally. Instead, there's some kind of message or hidden meaning behind each one, designed to engage a person's brain and make them think about it. He didn't really pay much attention to them, though. They just make his brain hurt more than anything else. Seriously, why do people have to make up such complicated phrases if they just want to advise someone? Might as well just be direct and let them know straight to their face without confusing them. Someone might take it too literal at some point. He might. And to go back to the subject of green thumbs, why? Why would someone make such a weird saying like that? Maybe it's some kind of language amongst farmers that seem to put a high priority on fingers and thumbs. But man, does that sound weird to think. Plus, wouldn't it technically be brown thumbs if that were the case? Because, you know, putting your thumbs in brown dirt. Think we should try gardening ourselves someday? You should. It's a rather fun hobby if you can get into it. Your father certainly did. Dad did? Really? How come I don't know about it? Guess it was never brought up or anything, she shrugged. Either way, it was long before we had you. Your father used to go with his father, your grandfather, to a farm they had back in their village. How was it? It was wonderful, the sincerity in her voice was accompanied by a gentle smile. I remembered the first time I went there and how dirty he was from head to toe. He minded it a little too much any time I came over, that silly man, but yes, he was an incredibly talented one. Had the green thumbs, you could say. Pumpkins, strawberries, tomato cherries, mulberries, he just loved gardening. And he was so smart, too. Knew all the tools, how to check the soil, how to tell if the plant is healthy or not. Yeah, that was just like his dad. Issei couldn't hold back from grinning, able to picture a scene where his dad was crouched next to a berry bush, gently testing the fruits and rubbing the leaves between his fingers as he inspected its condition. A hard worker, he would be, and incredibly meticulous. And then, maybe he'd panic when he'd see mom approaching, which made him laugh inside. He'd be so embarrassed, dirt all over his shirt and pants, and mom would just roll her eyes and talk to him like there was nothing wrong. And yeah, dad would be uneasy at first, but then he'd open up slowly. And then, everything is the same as ever. Man, that sounds nice. Ophis raised a hand. Was it an actual farm to sell to the people? Not at all, sweetie. It was just a personal land for farming that your uncle's father had since he was little. Could we go visit it someday? She opened her mouth to answer before letting out a hum. That wouldn't be a bad idea. Someday, though. We'd need to ask Guru first and notify his brother. So hey, if he doesn't farm now, what does dad like to do? Fishing, the answer came with a shudder. I'm not a big fan of that one, gotta admit. Slimy, slippery and gross erg. Now the previous dreamy sequence in his head was replaced with a scene of his dad reeling back, drawing a fish out of the waters. Mom would probably yelp in surprise and instantly put 5 meters worth of distance between them, just so that the flailing fish wouldn't accidentally slap her in the face or something equally silly. Fishing, eh? Dottie masked his snort by emulating a cough. Are there any fishing proverbs? Ophis seemed to have the answer, reciting it from memory. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you feed him for life. Okay, now that sounds a little more logical and definitely more wise sounding. And green thumbs don't. No. They sound like a description for some kind of alien from a highly CGI movie, he sighed out loud. Maybe it's because they touched leaves so much that the green color came off and attached to their fingers. But that's not how it works, I think. Oh, Issei. Just leave the proverbs as they are. You'll come to appreciate them someday. He shared a look with Ophis, both deadpanning when his mom said that. Yeah, they definitely appreciate it. Appreciate how dumb they can be sometimes. Soap and bubbles. Humans love to take care of their hygiene. Both because it feels really nice and it's really important for their own health. Ophis could attest to the former point, recognizing just how different it is now that she's adapted to the human life, such as sleeping on a warm fluffy bed. How she managed to live all her life just sleeping on rocks or suspended in space is a miracle, or taking baths every day. And right now, standing in front of her very own bathroom with a towel wrapped around her body, she was prepared. Remember Auntie's words, everything must be rinsed and cleaned. That seemed like such a chore to most people, considering that it really does include from head to toe. But Ophis was of the opinion that it was truly a blissful experience, one that left her in anticipation for her next bath. She doesn't waste time to push the door in, walking into a little room that was practically a small corridor of sorts. To her left was a little sink and a mirror, with a stool below it to let her step up on it and see her face, as well as to brush her teeth. Deeper in, a little box-looking bathtub-like area that could be filled with water, with a shower head nearby for her to rinse herself off afterwards. Ophis knew that her face didn't look any different, but she knew for a fact that the excitement bubbling in her was anything but genuine. Somehow, baths had become just as enjoyable to her as eating and playing with Issei is. And again, all the things she'd come to like were all things that she'd never experienced before. Things she'd only begun to understand and accept as part of normality now that she'd joined the Hyoudou family. Without wasting much time, she let the water begin running hot. Never cold. She tried that once and though it was refreshing, as Auntie called it, she had been like a grouchy cat for the rest of the morning, as her body decided that, just because she was a dragon which was close to being reptilian, and hence meant that she was apparently meant to be cold-blooded. Did not make her like the cold at all. Let's see, picking up a few jars and bottles on the sink to inspect them, she hummed as she tried to recall what each one was for. Bath salts for the bathtub, shampoo and conditioner, soap for rinsing off afterwards. Humans certainly love making a lot of things for all sorts of uses, and it seemed that there was no shortage of bath-related things. She'd known that they really care for their hygiene a lot, but even this was a little too much. No, this should be enough. I will not have any issues. Determined, she picked up one of the newly opened jars and brought it over to the tub, seeing that it was filled up to a quarter now. She dipped a finger in and sighed when it felt sufficiently warm. Hopefully, it'll get even hotter. The wait is nice, she would admit. While some would be too impatient, she preferred to listen to the sound of the running water. It's soothing, in some way, that never fails to evoke the image of a river in her mind. She'd visited some plenty of times, of course, but she wondered if she could go there with Issei and his family someday. It would be nice. Ah yes, and beaches too. She'd always noticed just how happy families are when they go there together, laughing up a storm as they ate ice cream and played in the water together. Good for them. I wonder if Issei can swim, she thought, only to then shake her head, almost amused. As if he wouldn't. Issei is very active. He must certainly know how to. After the tub was filled halfway, she added the bath salts and watched them dissolve in the clear water, only for it to then slowly turn into a lovely mix of purples and pinks. Coloring, that certainly makes it look all that more appealing. Humming in satisfaction, she hung up her towel on the rack before dipping into the water, sighing in relief. Auntie would be horrified by how red her entire body was becoming, thanks to how hot the water is now, but she didn't mind. This feels amazing. Human luxuries. Please, keep making more. Almost slipping off and submerging her face in the water, Ophis instead chooses to lean her head against the edge of the tub, feeling her hair splay out around her on the water's surface. It's one thing to do this once. But getting to do this every day. Maybe someday, she'll get bored of this and forgo it completely. But she doubted that day would ever come. And if it does, then she's going to enjoy it to the fullest until then. Scrub your hair and your scalp with the shampoo. Rinse it off. Then, repeat the same with conditioner, she recited, remembering the instructions Auntie had given her on how to wash her hair. That she has longer hair makes the process a little longer, but it wasn't like she was going to complain. She liked having it long either way. And certainly not because Issei complimented it that one time. Certainly. Well okay, then it definitely is because of that. Issei is too honest for his own good, she sighed, though she wasn't upset by that. If anything, it made his compliments all the more meaningful, and she rather enjoyed hearing them. And he did say before that I looked good in black. Honestly, her choice of black was simply because she wasn't sure what other colors she would have preferred, so she'd just automatically made a simple black dress for herself when she'd begun traveling around the realms. It was a non-conspicuous color that would help her blend in well enough. But, well, if Issei thinks she looks good with it, then she's not going to complain. Right. He was her best friend. His opinion mattered very much. It was quite a long time before she had been done with her bath, for she enjoyed it quite a little too much, as Auntie would jokingly say, but she was not ashamed to say that she really does. Once she was done, she stepped out of the bath, lamenting how cold the air was. And the fact she had to walk back to the sink to grab the other bottles. Note to self. Next time, just bring everything to the tub. Might as well save her the time. As the water in the tub drained, she turned on the shower next, feeling the familiar heat wash over. It was made even better as she applied soap to herself before using a scrub, the feeling akin to scratching an itch. Satisfying could not begin to describe it. The shampoo came next, and she made very sure to leave the water running while she angled her head away to keep it from completely washing away all the shampoo. She worked at her hair, from root to tip, with a kind of attention that she would have never done before. She massaged her scalp, scrubbed with her fingertips, and ran her fingers through her hair to cover every inch. Wash that away, then repeat with the conditioner. The slippery sensation feels a little weird, like having oiled her hands, but she doesn't mind it too much. If it keeps her hair healthy and good smelling, she wasn't going to complain. I wonder how I was able to live without any of this in the past. She supposed that was just her mistake of secluding herself in the dimensionless gap. And yes, secluding would typically mean a lack of presence of any other people, though she decided to just ignore Great Red. Now that she thought about, how is that big brute holding up? She hadn't thought to contact it since she'd left, and she'd been away for a very long time. At this point, Great Red might have just turned it into his turf. That thought oddly doesn't bother her. She supposed she understood why. The dimensionless gap was her home, yes, but she'd only ever sought the silence. It was why her goal had always been to eradicate Great Red, just so that she could have it all to herself. No disruption, no noise, nothing. But then I would have never met Issei. Just thinking of her brunette friend made her smile a little. Well, living with him is anything but quiet, but she's found herself enjoying this change much more than she realized. It's a warm, loving atmosphere that she practically relishes being a part of and knows that she would protect it at all cost. And protect it she has. None of the Hyoudous need to know that she's already called at least 12 stray devils in the neighborhood. If anyone asked, it was just a freak accident. Not like a cute little girl like her could possibly be involved in that. Stretching her arms above herself, as the water trickled against her skin and hair, she let out a sigh once more and thought to herself just how fortunate she is. The steam did little to hide her happy smile. Great Red can have the dimensionless gap. She was happy here. The office has an existential crisis, sort of. Issei liked to think that he was easily surprised by a lot of things. And yeah, he really was. Sure, one could say that he wasn't all too weirded out by the fact that Office was stronger than him by magnitudes. And that he was relatively chill with such a large hairy alligator showing up outside of their house that one time. Oh yeah, and it could talk too. But still, that didn't mean he hadn't been surprised by those things at first. It was just the fact that he had a strange ability to quickly accept something and just smile back. Someone might call him an idiot for that, but oh well. Not like it was that bad. So yeah. He gets surprised just like the average Joe, but he was fairly confident that nothing could truly make him trip and fall, or something like that. Surprises are surprises, and he'll definitely reel back a little, but he'll recover quickly enough. That was just how he is. At least, until now. What? Issei cringed, and boy did he cringe hard. Mom and Dad were the same too, if the way they suddenly turned their heads away was any indication. And the source of all that. Why, it was Office, who looked as if the world around was breaking apart around her. Fresh out of the bath and with new clothes on, her hair wild but silky, her eyes wide like platters and breath trembling. Odd, she looks devastated. And she'd never stammered before. Never. She'd paused, yes, but this was something different. She genuinely looked and sounded heartbroken. All of a sudden, he wished he wasn't here. I don't get it, there it is again. Office stuttering made him want to comfort her, but the shock rooted him in his spot. Why can't I? Neither Mom nor Dad wanted to be the one to answer her, looking at each other and trying to make the other do it. When it was certain none of them were going to do it, he decided to step up in their place. Because it's not good for your body. But you said that bathing cleans your body. Well, sure, but there's such a thing as doing something in moderation compared to doing something too much, you know. The Office looked positively dejected by that, and he wished he could have just eaten his words. But why? Mom. The look on her face told him just how much she wanted to answer her question. And by that, she didn't want to. At all. There's a lot of health-related problems with that. Typically, a single showering session should be limited to 15 minutes only, and you, Office, have been showering for 30 minutes. A whole double of that, or half an hour. Yikes. He knew before that Office really likes her baths, but he didn't know they were that long. The explanation is a little lengthy, so I'll just summarize it to the important bits. Basically, long hot showers will over-dry your body, including your skin, hair and nails over time. They also strip your skin's natural oils, and then your skin will start to feel dry and cracked. Another study discussed how showering too much can wash away the normal flora bacteria, but the good kind that live on your skin. Wait, there's bacteria on our skin. Issei, there's germs practically everywhere. Even in the yogurt you eat, though typically these are the good kinds. But yes, there is bacteria on your skin. I see. I understand, Ophis said. And then, she ducked her head low. I apologize for worrying you, Auntie and Uncle. I promise I won't shower for any longer than 15 minutes a day next time. That may be what Mom and Dad want her to do, but that didn't mean they liked how sad she sounded. And the worst part was that this wasn't something that they couldn't exactly compromise on. I think there's an internet article that said that if you want to shower a little longer, you can turn down the water's temperature. Never. Well, he was out of ideas. Then I guess you'll just have to get used to it somehow. Ophis didn't meet his eyes, but eventually nodded. Yes, I do think that is for the best. Mom and Dad gave some words to console her, but even Issei knew it wasn't that helpful. Someone would say that it was dramatic, but it would be something like how he wouldn't be allowed to go to the playground ever again for the rest of his life. Some people have different things that they care a lot about, even if others would think it was childish. Then again, they are children. So. Still, this wasn't helping with Ophis's mood in the slightest. Mom looked panicking, and Dad was trying his best to stay calm for the both of them. His best friend was trying very hard to look nonchalant as always, but there was only so much she could do when she'd just been told something that was practically akin to the end of the world for her. Issei bit down on his lip and thought on how they were supposed to lift her mood. Clearly, it wouldn't be an easy thing to do, but something had to be better than nothing. He didn't want Ophis to stay sad forever. But what could they do? Oh. Mom, I want a smoothie, he said all of a sudden, drawing everyone's eyes to him. And maybe some fruits, too. Like apples and strawberries if we have any in the fridge. Why would you? Mom wasn't dumb. She caught onto the message really quickly and understood what he meant. Oh. She nodded quickly. Of course. I'll go get started on them. And maybe blankets while we're at it. Dad nodded as well, a glint in his eye. Sure thing, sport. I'll go grab them. Why don't you two warm up the couch for us while you're at it? Sure thing. He dragged a confused-looking Ophis by the hand to the living room, sitting on the couch. She looked him in the eyes, and he simply grinned back. It didn't take too long for Mom and Dad to return, and the four of them were on the couch together, watching the television with blankets wrapped around each person, though he shared his with Ophis, while Uncle and Auntie sat on opposite ends. On the coffee table at the front, 4 glasses filled with a spinach smoothie surrounded a bowl of an assortment of fruits. There was even a smaller bowl with candy in it. Somehow, the suddenness of the entire situation had shocked Ophis into absolute silence, unsure of what to say as she simply glanced left and right, trying to understand what was happening. Not like he was gonna let the momentum end there and then, though. He swiped the remote from the table and put on. Are very fussy, and she'll expect his carefully choreographed routine to be focused. He opens with a bow. And the confusion only grows, though she doesn't try to leave. Instead, she grabs a glass and sips at her drink, while he plucks a strawberry and eats it. What is that bird doing? Dancing at least, it looks like that. Dad. But one's a male, and he's trying to get that other bird's attention. To her, make her like him. I see. Do all birds do this? Not at all, Ophis. Every animal has their special way to get their partner's attention. Some birds dance, some sing. I see. Oh my. That looks very interesting. Doesn't it? Look at him go. Such a graceful little thing. Mom, that looks like something a ballerina would do. I don't know if a male bird should be doing something like that. Oh, hush you. Anyone can dance if they want. A snicker. Issei doesn't need to look at whom it came from, but it didn't stop him from grinning as he continued to watch the funny-looking dance from the blackbird. His dad and mom laughing together got him to join in, and even Ophis isn't immune to it. Good thing that she's feeling better, because if she'd stayed as she did, he was pretty sure he, mom and dad would just collectively implode. Note to self. Ask dad to get some more ice cream, just in case. End of the part 3. So how was this story? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this story with your friends, and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.